I don't like to prescribe advice. I like to share perspective. So what I would probably do with a person that came to me, which happens a lot when someone's starting a business, is first I want to understand the context around why they're doing it. Like what's the deep-seated why? Why are they starting this? I want to understand the business. I want to understand the strategy. I want to understand the way that they think. And then from there, I like to understand where they want advice. What I realized, like in my 20s, I thought people wanted advice. I thought people wanted the answers. And I would just prescribe advice. And then I'd get so fucking pissed off when people didn't take the advice and do anything with it. What you have to realize is when someone asks for advice, they want it. If someone's not asking for advice, you might not want to give it to them because you're wasting your time and they're just going to have it come and go.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Pete Sena. And Pete started his journey writing code as a kid and building technology. And then in high school, taught himself design so that he could make cool interfaces and learned Photoshop along the way. And then while going off to college, started a digital agency and then built a digital agent or continued to build or built a digital agency out of college. Then became an accredited investor and invested in tech startup companies. Then became a serial entrepreneur to help businesses grow. Also built a co-working space for businesses and is doing a bit of coaching and advising for startups as well. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Pete.
It's great to be here. I love that you did that so that I didn't have to. And the way that you said it sounded a lot more eloquent than I would probably say it. So thanks for that.
Absolutely. I try and take everybody's lives and boil it into 30 seconds. So it works out well. But let's rewind and unpack things a bit. And so tell us a little bit about how your journey got started in high school, liking to write code and building technology.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm I would call it like just a student of life, kind of 80s baby. Tech at that time was, this, it was a really interesting time back then to get into tech because we were still in the era where people were building computers and like tinkering and hacking, dating myself a little bit, but it's like we didn't have a world where there was YouTube and Chat GPT and all the stuff that we have today. So, there was a lot of exploration, experimentation. The questions you had didn't have answers, at the speed of an LLM or at the speed of a YouTube search. So that made for like a really interesting, curious childhood where I was always tinkering with computers, building computers, realized that games and programs were built by code. So when I discovered that, I was like, oh, what's this code thing? How do I learn how to code? Nobody in my family did that. So I was the first, person in my neighborhood or family that kind of got into that stuff. And then, my family was nice enough. My dad, I remember when he got his income tax check back, he basically got a home computer for our house. And that thing went in the basement and I don't think I ever left the basement. And I feel bad because nobody ever got any computer time. But I like to think that I was able to create a return on investment, if nothing else for myself, than my family as well.
Oh, that's awesome. And it sounds like it was a great opportunity to kind of get involved, get going on things on technology and have a good experience on that front. So now you did that, you kind of, you had that as or kind of got into that growing up, doing technology, learning some of that. And then you went off to college and studied. And while you were in college, also did a digital agency. Is that right?
Yeah. So the easier way to articulate that for something that would make the audience care, right? Because I always say like, well, why should you listen to me? Well, you should listen to me because every piece of advice I'm going to share is something I've actually gone through. I'm not going to be spouting things off textbooks or, motivational crap that I haven't actually lived. So yeah, while I was in college, I had been tinkering with a couple different things. I actually ended up building what was, before we had Facebook, I built what was basically like a Facebook clone, again, before Facebook existed. And it was pretty much like a, you know, way to capture all the cool parties that were on campus at UConn, and capture like photos of people doing different things and whatnot. So you can imagine at that time the kind of crazy shit that popped up in the news feed that I had built. So I was tinkering, I was building stuff, I was experimenting, and I got known as someone who could build apps and websites and that sort of thing. So I was getting a lot of like projects for like friends and family, just like making a little bit extra money doing that. And then I got a gig working with a really large sports marketing company. And ultimately that turned into just an appetite for entrepreneurship. And really for me, the appetite for entrepreneurship came from, I didn't realize that like my fingers typing away on a keyboard and clicking away on my mouse and designing things was super valuable for people. I didn't know it back then. I know it now. But I had a lot of power. I had a lot of leverage with the ability to do that at that time. It wasn't as easy to do this stuff, right? Nowadays, anybody can teach themselves how to make a web page. Anybody can teach themselves how to do this stuff. Back then, it required a lot more effort, a lot more energy, a lot more tinkering to make it happen. So that led to me realizing that I had bigger aspirations, things that I wanted to do. I was working at that sports marketing company. I was sort of faced with a choice, and the choice was basically going between, am I going to be a designer or am I going to be a coder? And I just didn't like or. I still don't love the word or. I think and is a better word. And ultimately that then resulted in me leaving and starting my own business, which at that time became what is known today as DS. Lovingly referred to as.
Before we get too far ahead, just a couple quick maybe things to interject. So you started out doing it, there's some of the digital agency while you're in college. What did
Yes.
you study, or what did you study in college during that time?
Oh yeah. So I originally thought I was going to go in and study design, which is kind of an interesting thing. I got into a bunch of really good design schools, ultimately didn't end up getting financial aid. So I went to my fallback school, which was a state school. So I went to UConn. I realized very quickly at that time, again, UConn's amazing today, right? It's really hard to get into. It's a great school. But back then, UConn did not have a great graphic design program. I sort of met some people, looked at some of the things, and not to sound like an asshole, but I was already further along than like most of the juniors and seniors when I was going in as a freshman. So I was like, yeah, I'm not really interested in this. I wasn't inspired by the professors and what they had achieved. And it wasn't a great design school. It wasn't some of the schools that I got into. So I was like, oh, cool, I'll do computer science. They didn't particularly have a strong engineering team at the time. I remember placing out of a specific course back then, which was I think Java or something. I had already known a bunch of languages. So I was like, this isn't really great. So I ended up I was like, you know what, let me tinker with this business stuff. I'll do like a management information systems or business systems kind of thing. And that was ultimately what I ended up studying there. So I studied in the School of Business at UConn because professionally outside of school, I was already getting paid to do design work. I was already getting paid to do coding work. And that's ultimately why I skipped and went a different route from an education perspective. I would say, to be really frank with the audience, because I think university and I think college and education is really important. I'm an ADHD type of person. I never really had good professors that tailored learning and development programs towards me. So as a result of it, I'm a very nonlinear learner. So I would say like my education did not define me. If anything, my education constrained me into making different decisions, which is why, when everybody was enjoying college life, going out partying, chasing girls and booze and all that kind of thing, I was in my dorm room grinding, crushing Red Bulls, drinking Starbucks and building stuff for clients. And like I said, started a digital agency in college. And at that time, for the first few years, it was just me. Got out of school, finished school, and grew from there. But I want to be really clear with you, Devin, is that I actually think that college held me back. And hindsight being 2020, I would have either focused my energy and went to a different school at that time. Again, UConn's amazing today. I do a ton of work with them today. I wish I could go to UConn today in 2023. It was not the same when I was going to school there. But as a result of it, that's what put me on my path to entrepreneurship, was seeking something that I didn't find and deciding that I wanted to go and create it.
So now So you started the digital agency while you're in school, came out of school, and then continued that. So did you basically just start out, or from the get-go, start out on your own and start building your agency and been doing it ever since? Or kind of walk us through a bit of, or after
Yeah.
you came out of school, how you started going about doing that?
100%. So first thing I did was when I was out of school, I hired one of my childhood friends. Excuse me, sorry, this cough is lingering. After school, hired one of my childhood friends. He was an engineer, and the reason why was because we had too much coding work, and there's only so much time in a day, so that I needed more people to code, and then from there, ran out of time, needed more people to help design. So what would happen is I would tap out on the function that I needed, whether it was like, I was spending too much time bookkeeping and now we had money coming in. So I was able to hire someone on finance or hire someone to do, those different roles that I didn't have time for. And ultimately for the first few years, it was really a small operation. And then a couple of years into the business, I ended up bringing on a co-founder who was really, really talented with business development, strategy, people. He had a lot of good people skills. And that ultimately was the really big catalyst for the success, where it was, he was the business development guy. He was the guy that was going to go out and be the hype machine. And I was going to be the guy that was going to get the work done and build the teams to get the work done. And that was really, really strong and successful. We did that together for about 10 years. Then both he and I became angel investors, started doing a lot of investing in tech, and kind of stepped in shit a couple of times. But that was ultimately, I'd say, like the early years, and happy to go into more detail if it's helpful.
No, that sounds great. So now you get into the early years, and so you just build out the agency, have that bit of that duality of who will cover which role, and it sounds like it was good leveraging of the different skill sets between the different individuals. So now you did that, and at some point, I believe if I remember when we talked before, you also got into being a credited investor and getting into tech companies and starting to doing some investing and also doing some helping them to build and grow. And so walk us through a little bit how you made was that in tandem with the digital agency, or did you make that transition, or kind of how did that play into the journey?
Yeah, I mean, life is a gradient, right? Life is not black and white. It's not single colored. It's shades of that. All an accredited investor means is that your net worth is over a certain amount, and you can fill out a couple of forms and they can verify that. And then magic, that basically means, are you sure that you want to risk your money to invest in this business that is high risk and might lose you all your money? Check yes on the dotted line. So it sounds fancier than it is. But to answer your question, we were doing really well. My co-founder and I, we were scaling the business. And as a result of it, we were always about putting it back into the business to invest in the business growth. And I think we got to an interesting point where we had done some work with some interesting high-tech companies. And some of them at that point were allowing us to do work for cash plus equity. So we would sort of discount our fees a little bit, make a little bit of money, lower our margin a little bit, but still make money, still pay all the bills, and then do some equity investments as well. And then when we started doing that, we realized that as accredited investors, we could write angel checks. So at that time, the checks were 5,000 to 25,000, smaller checks, and get access to early stage, seed level companies or super seed, pre-A round venture-backed companies. And that's what I mean by being an accredited investor. So because we were doing a lot of work for tech companies, SaaS companies specifically, we were getting a lot of deal flow. So we would get deals that would hit our inbox that weren't necessarily a good fit for the agency, because at that time, the agency was starting to grow. We were starting to work with bigger clients. We started having bigger teams, which basically meant we had much higher overhead. So we couldn't be as experimental with our downtime anymore. So now we had a lot less downtime. People were much more busy, booked up. So then my co-founder and I started doing a lot of those investments outside of the business, separate to the business, based on our own, personal net worth, personal capital, and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's what I mean by the angel investing type stuff.
No, makes sense. So it sounds like, good opportunity. You can work with some cool clients, have a bit of upside if they do well, and be a bit more involved, and then and be able to leverage some of the time that you have, and as things grow. So now you did that, and you're running the agency, getting involved with some tech companies, doing a bit of investing, or swapping for equity. And then at some point along the way, you also built I think, a co-working space, or got involved with doing that for businesses as well. Is that right?
Yeah. So just to go a little bit deeper for the audience that might not know, so my co-founder and I, at the time, it was the early 2000s, and we were in New Haven, Connecticut, which is not necessarily known as like a hotbed of, startup transformation, right? We weren't in Silicon Valley, we weren't in Los Angeles, we weren't in, you know, New York. Obviously, today the hotbeds are Austin and Miami and among other places. But again, we weren't in a particular place that was known for entrepreneurship. And what we ran into a lot was we had a lot of people we were working with in New York City. We were doing a lot of different types of work with bigger brands from all over the world. And it pissed us off that there wasn't one place that brought people from different disciplines together. So he and I started kind of collaborating on that. We had this idea for like, what if we could bring together people in a way where, in the same building, we'd have photographers and coders and designers and strategists and writers and in all different types of disciplines that could work together. And we had this sort of idea of like what now we would call hub and spoke or decentralized or all the fancy buzzwords. But back then it was just like, why do we have to like go online or like go to New York or go to California to find like talented people? And when, if you're in Silicon Valley, if you're in Palo Alto, you like trip over somebody who's an engineer in the coffee shop and, you start riffing and having a conversation. So community was a powerful thing. So we had this idea, we didn't have a ton of money back then, so we weren't able to do much with that idea. We sort of parked it. Years go by, and our lease was up actually in the building that we were in at the time in New Haven. We had this really cool building. It was like an, old high ceilings, very like, kind of urban style. And it was always a really cool space. And our lease was up and we were like, oh, we need to figure out a place to look for. So typically on the commercial partnership side, on the commercial relationships, that's really where my co-founder was like really like one of his superpowers is sort of figuring out how to get shit done that's a little bit unconventional. And so he, was looking on the map and he actually found, ironically across the street was an old abandoned bus depot. And we basically revisited that idea. And, again, I give him all the credit for that one because he was really the champion of that idea and that vision. And, together we were able to, he was able to step away from the business. I ran the business. I sort of took over as CEO. And while I was running the business, he was out, doing the necessary things that needed to get done. Combination of us raising the capital and building the relationships and navigating the political climate. And then that ultimately became District. And District is a tech and innovation campus focused on entrepreneurship located in New Haven, Connecticut. It's a mile down the road from Yale School of Management. Mm-hmm. And that building, that campus ultimately became a hub for innovation and a hub of hope for the Connecticut ecosystem in many ways. So on that campus, yes, we do have a co-working space. It's our version of a co-working space. We own the asset, unlike WeWork, which we know is in a bit of trouble right now. They just filed for bankruptcy. So we own the asset. We're at full occupancy. We've expanded it twice. And now we have people all over the world asking us to open the concept of a district in other places. And so on that campus, we've got the largest venture capital group in the state of Connecticut is based there. We've got some state organizations are based there. We've got entrepreneurs from all shapes and sizes, from the solopreneur all the way up to people that are stationed here and work for companies all over the world. So that's District, and that is that venture. And what you'll notice if you sort of track my story out and the story of the people that I spend time with and energy with, we're really big picture thinkers. We're visionary thinkers in terms of like, how does a business model evolve? How does a business evolve to be more than just the product and the service that you sell? So now what we're doing is sort of like a loosely federated and a loosely coupled set of different businesses and brands that we invest in that all create mutual value exchange. So one of our newer ventures is a photo video studio. And the reason why we created that is because our agency was constantly hiring production companies, video companies, photo companies. We found a really, really highly talented, highly motivated small business owner. We figured out a way to acquire and do an acqui-hire style transformation. And now we've invested in putting a studio on the campus here where everyone that's on the campus, all 100 plus companies can all tap into that studio for photo, for video, for that sort of thing. On the campus, we also have a law lab. So we've got a law lab. They do intellectual property law. They do startup law. And as a result of it, they do a lot of like on-campus programs. So for them, they give away a little bit of free legal advice and they walk away with a ton of deal flow, a ton of legal advice. So for us, it's all about how do you create a force multiplier of change? And that's the way that we think about business in general, is just like, how do you connect the dots? How do you light people up, lean into people's biggest strengths? And that's ultimately what District became. And many of the businesses now that fall under, our respective holdings companies are really designed to add mutual value exchange in a way that helps everybody grow in a reciprocal way.
No, it sounds awesome. Sounds like a great place and fun, and sounds like you're there to stay and set up a lot better than we work. And as you mentioned, they're in a bit of trouble, and we'll see how that one all works out. But now the other thing I think you mentioned as well, and it maybe goes in along with the co-working space, is you've also got into some coaching and advisory work. So maybe catch us up with all the different things going on, and you like to put "and" instead of "or." Kind of walk us through where you're at today, kind of what do you have going on, and what are you focusing on?
Yeah, for sure. So as the agency grew, now we have a great leadership team that runs it on the day to day. I'm not really as involved as I previously was. What's interesting is a lot of our bigger clients, a lot of my relationships would bring me in, bring the team in. But now that the agency's grown and now that I'm less involved in the day to day, there's a lot of clients that still want to work with me and that still want to have, participation or collaboration from where I can help. And I think that what's happened is it became less and less realistic because, it came at a higher fee or it just didn't fit into the structure model that we had. So for some customers of ours that fit into, what we call our tier one clients, if there's a big problem that needs to be solved that requires creative strategy, that requires, a leadership possibility, typically what I'll do there is I'll come in as a fractional executive. So it could be a fractional chief marketing officer, a fractional chief creative officer. And what I'll do is I'll work with those leaders to help them to understand their vision, understand a roadmap, understand the blockers, and then build teams and solutions to do that. So I don't ever refer to myself as an executive coach because I've just met a lot of really shitty executive coaches that, they read a couple of books on coaching, they get a certification, but they've never actually been in the trenches. I think the reason why my clients like to bring me in as an advisor or as a consultant or as a fractional exec is that I've walked the walk and it's not just talk the talk. So I'm very careful to label myself a coach. I actually think largely like my entire life, I've been a coach where, I think that the best leaders are coaches, being able to sort of coach people to help achieve their level of greatness, understanding that, I see myself as a player coach. So both being, on the field when I need to be, but for the most part, being behind the players and supporting them and wherever they're at in their journey. So yeah, I do a lot of that now. As an example, I'll go in and help leaders align on their story. I believe that your story is your strategy and how you tell it. It makes a huge difference between success and failure. So that's a big thing that I do, where I'll go in and, in a very short period of time, typically it's like a 3-month type of intensive. I'll help them get set up. I'll help them figure out what they need to bring in, what they need to get rid of. And then in a lot of cases, I'll also help them line up agencies. And, sometimes my agency is a good fit. Sometimes it's not. One of the things that's great about me going in there is I can show them what is the fastest, least expensive, highest caliber way they can solve the problems that we've all agreed they're solving. And sometimes that means building an internal team. Sometimes that means going with, part-time employees or contractors. Sometimes that means hiring an agency or agencies, plural. So we get to the root of the problem. We figure out the story, we figure out the strategy, and then we move pretty quickly on driving the growth. So that's a big part of my life these days. Just from, a lot of my friends are building companies or executives at different brands. And really like storytelling is my superpower. That's really where I can add a lot of value. So that's typically how that works.
Well, sounds like a great place. Lots to keep you busy and excited and get to work with a lot of cool different startups and businesses. So sounds like definitely a great place to be. So
it's fun. It's definitely fun. Every day is a new challenge. Every day is a new opportunity. Every day is a new possibility. And that's the way that I like to live my life is, if I feel like I'm in the same place tomorrow as I was today, I'm stagnating, and stagnation is death, and I don't want to die anytime soon.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Sounds like a fun way to, or a fun place to be, and a great way to live life. So with that,
Certainly trying.
now as we wrap, or as we kind of caught up to the present day and wrapping towards the end of the episode, I always love to wrap up with two questions. So we're going to jump to those now. So the first question I'd like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What did you learn from it?
I'd say the worst business decision I ever made was trusting someone that deeply betrayed me. And ultimately what ended up happening is, my co-founder and I ended up bringing someone on to really help us scale the executive financial operations of the business. And I think what ended up happening is we had a very dishonest person that, literally robbed us. And in a very, and this is it's a vulnerable story to tell, but I tell it because as much shame as I feel experiencing it,
Hmm.
it's a lot more common than I thought it was. I felt like the biggest idiot. My partner and I, we were just, heartbroken over it. This person we thought we trusted, just completely, robbed and decimated a business that he and I had spent, a decade plus building. Luckily we recovered because, what I always say is like resilience is our superpower in a lot of ways. My partner and I, we came together, we kept moving forward. We're super forward obsessed. It's actually the name of our podcast. And we kept going and recovered, stronger than ever from it. Kept moving, but it was a lesson. It was an important lesson. And, I learned a lot from that, but that I would say would be the biggest business decision that I made that I regret. I don't have a lot of regrets in life, but blind trust is not a smart thing to do. The lifeblood of any business is the financials. The life force of any business is the people. So focus on your financials, focus on your people, know the lifeblood, know the life force, and that's going to help you scale your business in a meaningful way.
No, that's definitely a good takeaway. It's one where it's hard because I think a lot of times as you're getting into businesses, a lot of people you go in and you're probably a bit naive in the sense that you think, hey, everybody's going to get in, they're going to work hard, they're going to be honorable, they're going to do what they say they're going to do. And the more you get into business, you find that there are a lot of people that are like that, and some people that aren't, and then you have to figure out how you sift and weed between the two. So it sounds like definitely a easy mistake to make, but a great one to learn from.
Yeah, well, what I would say is, there's people who come in and don't do what they say they're going to do, and that's just like performance or fit or whatever. And again, we have to hold the mirror up and ask ourselves, why is that happening? And what we tolerate is what happens, right? So I think that boundaries and accountability is really important. But like, then there's the other side of it, which is just like literally like criminal, right?
Yep.
Where someone's like literally just an absolute piece of shit, and does things that are against the law. That I think is a little bit more rare, but it does happen. I've had a lot of colleagues of mine that I've shared drinks with, and we've had the war stories. But yeah, I think the most powerful thing to learn in anything is like everything's a lesson, right? The lessons, the language, the lessons, the experiences that we have, I think are signals for what's going to come next in the journey. And I think that it's less about what happens and more about what you do about it and what you do next differently. So I consider myself blessed to have had many of these lessons that, I've been able to recover from.
No, sounds like definitely a good mistake to learn from, and some good piece of advice. So now with that in mind, second question I would like to ask is, so now if you're talking to someone that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you give them?
I don't like to prescribe advice. I like to share perspective. So what I would probably do with a person that came to me, which happens a lot when someone's starting a business, is first I want to understand the context around why they're doing it. Like what's the deep-seated why? Why are they starting this? I want to understand the business. I want to understand the strategy. I want to understand the way that they think. And then from there, I like to understand where they want advice. What I realized, like in my 20s, I thought people wanted advice. I thought people wanted the answers. And I would just prescribe advice. And then I get so fucking pissed off when people didn't take the advice and do anything with it. What you have to realize is when someone asks for advice, they want it. If someone's not asking for advice, you might not want to give it to them because you're wasting your time and they're just going to have it come and go. Huge pet peeve of mine now is when people just throw advice out without asking questions first, because I think that it's super easy to write prescriptions without actually diagnosing the core issue. And I think that people oftentimes will solve for symptoms, not systems. And that's why I think, the healthcare system is broken. That's why I think a lot of businesses are broken, is that, people go listen to a 15-second or 30-second Instagram video about how to solve all their world problems. And one, they typically don't do anything with it. B, it's oftentimes not the right problem that they're solving for. So what I would say is I would want to dig deeper. I'd want to get more context, and then I want to be able to provide, a question, a narrative, or a suggestion based on real world advice that I have or real world data. Because I think that a lot of times people act on emotion and act on reaction as opposed to act on solving the real problem that they have.
No, I think that definitely is a good takeaway and a good piece of advice to incorporate. So with that, so now as we do wrap up towards the end of the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah. So thank you for that. Well, for one, I hope this is valuable for you. I hope this is valuable for you, the listener and the audience now or in the future. I'm Pete Sena on just about every channel. So I'm Pete Sena on Twitter X, I'm Pete Sena on LinkedIn. PeteSena.com is my personal website. If you've got a brand or a business that you're looking to transform, you can go to digitalsurgeons.com. That is the brand experience firm that I started 20 years ago. We have an amazing team and amazing work and can certainly help you with that. And if you're just looking to tune into more of my failure stories and how I recovered from them, you can follow my newsletter, The Forward Obsessed Founder, which you can get on PeteSena.com. It's 100% free. And I release that twice a month. And I cover real world stories. I cover real world perspective. And I'm always covering ways you can live a more creative, curious life. And I tie that back to business and each of those things. It goes out on Fridays, twice a month. So those are the ways that you can stay in touch with me. And what I would say is would love to hear from anybody. If you have questions, if you have curiosities, a lot of times people will email me or message me, and I'll find a way to weave that into a future article. So, if you're looking for maybe you need some support or advice and you don't have the funds to hire a consultant that's at my level, then maybe you can get some free advice by just asking me the question, and maybe I'll share that advice with other people. So I try to do that wherever I can to give back. I really wish that I had a version of myself when I was first getting started, because I could have made a lot less mistakes and gotten to the success I wanted faster.
Awesome. Well, definitely some great ways to connect. There some awesome ways that you support businesses, and people can reach out, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you, the listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. Just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners. Make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And on that note, if you ever need help along your journey with patents or trademarks or anything else for your startup, your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Pete, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks so much, man. Appreciate it. Appreciate everything you're doing.